Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Carl Schmitt's Dictatorship. We're looking today at the second part, pages 137 to 142 of book 5, chapter 5, which on the basically the habits of the Commissars during the French Revolution, during the National Assembly during the French Revolution in that sense. Uh, what is it? I want to get the title correctly. Sorry, the custom of the people's commissars during the French Revolution, right? So let's go look at. We start off where we left off. Okay, which uh, uh, I looked at he said that distinction between the period of the people's commissars. There's two periods: one before the creation of public safety, and those that came after. There was those people the rule of the examining of the rule of the National Convention through their commissars, two periods: one before the creation of the Committee of Public Safety and an act. Right. So therefore, that's the question. The task of the commissars were different. Here again, the starting point for the entire transformation of the constituting authorities was a mere function to monitor and control, which is this case was only the bringing of an action intended to eliminate all political resistance. So the original thing was to monitor and control, and to the resistance. In general, the actions of the commissars in the army, who should be distinguished from the commissars who should be distinguished from the commissars of the war commissioners, public servants in the administration of the army, who were as follows: to collect information on all military matters, on the general mood of the army, military developments and events, the political loyalties of the officers, the status, equipment, and maintenance of the army, impact of the soldiers' mood and discipline through speeches, the impact on the soldiers' mood and discipline through speeches, proclamations, agitations, distribution of the bulletin of the National Convention. There was a bulletin for the distribution of this, elimination of the insignia of the old government. They're forgetting all images of the participation in the assembly of the electors, surveillance of officers, especially generals, inspection of the storehouses, borders, strongholds, borders, arsenals, storehouses, production of artillery, fortification of shorelines and field hospitals, refurbishment of fortified places according to specific orders, through the use of engineers and experts, and semicolon, provisions of supplies and organizations for the Army's maintenance through requests made to the administrative bodies, road maintenance and repair, and exposure of any fraudulent behavior on the part of the Army suppliers who frequently work in alliance with the Commissars of Administration of the Army. So 23, 24, and 25, he says, by the decree of 16th April 1793, the convention dismissed all the commissars of administration and replaced them with 390 new ones. Okay, so they centralized the administration. On these matters, the commissars of the convention had to report back to the convention itself or to the Committee of General Defense, right? So therefore, on these matters, the commissars either to the convention itself or the Committee of General Defense. Initially, the commissars of the convention and the provinces were also given only functions of supervision and control. So therefore, the conventions where they were given the commissars of the convention in the provinces were also given only functions of supervision and control. Information and reports to the convention on the general state of the mind among the authorities and in the population at large, and on the fulfillment of the laws. That's one thing. So that's one function, right? So get information and report to the convention of these things, right? A receipt of complaints and accusations from the people, revolutionary propaganda through proclamations, fraternizing speeches, festivities, participation in politically loyal party organizations, Jacobite clubs and societies in the provinces, and the popular societies, and enlisting them for cooperation in official activities. That's not a thing. So, enlisting those socializing, participating in, and getting them to help you as an agent, to enlisting them for cooperation in your the duties, right? And the surveillance of the activities of the counter-revolutionaries. Again, this right there. But a later period also witnessed the cleansing of counter-revolutionaries and aristocrats in official bodies and institutions and the appointment of loyal Republicans in their place, as well as the establishment of new administrative organizations, the division into the provinces and the districts, the direct execution of the laws if need be, namely in the recruitment of the army and in securing the army's needs, or in fighting the counter-revolutionaries and profiteering. The scarcity of provisions has been traced back. The scarcity of provisions had been traced back to counter-revolutionary intrigues, right? Yeah. This is all references to where this is support evidence for this. There is reestablishment of public order and security. First, first of all, through the enlightenment of the masses and uproars caused by the scarcity of provisions, and then by securing free trade of cereals, by preventing profiteering, by accumulating revenue reserves, by attending to the ailments of the population, by negotiation with firm owners over the employment of unemployed, and with workers over the return to work, and by dealing with agitators as if they were distraught persons. Yeah, lost. We're lost. Distraught persons are lost. They were lost. People were, in other words, the agitators that they were to be lost in that sense. By comparison with the powers of the authorities, the powers of the commissars began to expand even more in proportion to their tasks, through rights of sheer surveillance and control that corresponded to the purpose of exercising control required in the concrete situation. So therefore, in other words, he's saying that the power in other words, the power of these things expanded even more in proportion to their tasks, through the sheer right of surveillance and control that corresponded with their authorities, right? Purposes of control required to their concrete situation. Inspection of rooms and storehouses, presentation of documents registered in correspondence, requests for the various bodies asked to comply with all such things and perform, and necessary be authorized by the Commission to undertake requested action, autonomous intervention in local procedures through suspension and nullification, suspension, cassation. An informal instrument composed in the 18th century, similar to deliveramento and from outdoors. So it's a nullification, suspension of official. In other words, that ending, suspension and nullification of official procedures through decisions and the like, or through direct implementation of an official procedure. Interference in the official appointments, to begin with, through the installation of a surveillant or supervisor over untrustworthy civil servants and bodies, through provisional dismissals and provisional. Okay, let's go back for a second. Okay, we're going to go back to these things, through provisional dismissals and the new and provisional new appointments in their place, through arbitrations concerning the list of jurors, through the elimination of untrustworthy jurors and through the suspension and disarming of untrustworthy National Guards. Right. So there's three notes here that, and I think this is the first one. 31, a bid decrees convention of 24th September 1792 and 4 April 1793. These were ordinary requests for measures directed at reestablishing public tranquility, at drawing up and submitting lists of suspects, and even of lazy, indifferent people, at the conducting strict passport control on authorities in the military administration, especially on army commissars. When requests were made to the general to convene meetings of the general staff, to forbid the military band to play royalist songs, or to delegate cases to the military court when royalist leaflets were circulated. Requests made to revolutionary tribunals or qualified requests, i.e., that bore an authorization of the body responsible for their execution. Note 32, which occurs here with provisional dismissals, right? Originally, the Commissars had special authorizations. They also acted without one authorization. The general capacity to dismiss people from office was created through the decree of 26 January 1793. From time to time, dismissals were also made through a resolution of the convention, and dismissals could combine with arrest of the dismissed official. And last, 33 over here. In emergencies, this had already happened in October 1792. After Drummond's treason, the Commission of the Army instantly mandated a new general with the supreme command for the completion of the municipalities. General authorization to make new appointments was given only on the basis of decree of 21st January 1793 and without a right to reappoint those who had been dismissed. The newly appointed had to be people of reliable civic activism, civic spiritedness, civism. Not civil. Civility is not the right word. It's no different. Again, this is like it's public spiritedness in that sense. Civicism, not civility, but in the sense that they were publicly anointed in that sense, right? So there's the means by which these commissars' proceedings in individual cases differed according to the concrete circumstances. In other words, how these commissars proceeded in individual cases differed from each case, right? Appeals to authority, requisitions for the public force or the force, the army force, the police force or the army force, that is the police, the National Guards, battalions of volunteers, or some of the regular troops stationed in the vicinity. When there was a riot, they appealed to the administrative authority for the necessary measures, or they intervened directly in autonomously with troops they had recruited for the purpose, or they received from the municipal authority a commando of the National Guards, to which they then gave further orders. From time to time, they negotiated with the enemy and came to an agreement on disarmament and the like. No amnesty. Disarmament, but no amnesty, right? All these functions were based on the execution of executive power of the commissars, from which it followed that initially they were not entitled to exceed their already far-reaching legal regulations by encroaching upon the personal freedoms, the private property, or indeed the life of private persons more than the authority they represented or to which they appealed. But their authority was also extended to arresting all the suspicious people who might disturb public tranquility. So look at this, point 34. The decree of the convention of 26 January 1793, all the suspected people who could in principle upset the peace of the public mind, right, tranquility. This is the translation of the actual French would be on all suspicious people who could disturb public peace, public tranquility. Right. One had the obligation to report to the convention within 24 hours, right, originally, of this thing, for general instructions on the procedure of arrest. See volume 3, right, against all the sacritans in all the churches where the bells were rung, sacraments with the bell ones. In this context, we also find numerous orders of expulsion, limitation on resident permits, etc. In some cases, the commissar also acts as a judge in order to satisfy the law according to which the arrested person had to be interrogated within 24 hours. See the interesting report by Joseph Fu. I think that's the note, translator notes. Okay, these are translator notes, and they're not really useful in finding how they were. Of course, one important limitation to what they could do was that they were not allowed to decide on the financials of state. In other words, they couldn't decide these commissars, people, these commissars that were sent out of this people's commissars had no authority over finances. Right, only commissars of the army were allowed to give remittances from the treasury, and they could do so only in case of emergency. Generally, the commissars appealed to the convention for remittances. Okay, 37. This is decree of 13th December 1793 for explicit prohibition to give orders at the expense of the treasury or to allow expenditures at the expense of the state. You see that place. This is the reason for the appeal to the convention to pass such regulation. Okay. The practice of collecting arbitrary taxes and contributions from aristocrats and from the rich did not exist until later. After the establishment of the Committee of Public Safety, the activity of individual commissars was controlled with greater precision because this was done through a more centralized organ than was possible under the National Convention, which now comprised several hundred members. So there was the National Convention had several hundred members, whereas the committee had a handful. So therefore, it was a much centralized control. The committee suspended the orders and decisions of representatives, and from time to time it sent special agents to monitor the commissars. That way, the freedom of action of these commissars enjoyed was restrained in favor of strict centralization. So therefore, in other words, before the Committee of Central, before the committee, the creation of the Committee of Public Safety, these commissars, public commissars, had more discretion. But then, after the creation of the committee sent uh, agents to look over, and central controlled them, and they had less discretion to monitor commissars. On the other hand, thanks to the revolutionary legislation and to the complete elimination of all civil rights and freedoms, the powers of commissars was enlarged beyond all measures in individual cases, and enlarged vis-a-vis the power. In other words, not only enlarged in terms of in other words, given the legislation, revolutionary legislation, and to the complete elimination or suspension of civic rights and freedoms, the power of the commissars were enlarged and measured in individual cases and also enlarged vis-a-vis the power of the local, and enlarged vis-a-vis the power of local authority as much as vis-a-vis that of the ordinary citizen. In other words, these commissars not only had more authority over, they had as their massive power enlarged vis-a-vis over the local authorities as much as that over the individual ordinary citizens, right? So therefore, they had more authority in that sense. Their power and control, or their or enlarge their power, this power of local authority, enlarged This would be the power of authority as much as that of ordinary citizen. Here again, there was a correlation between the expansion of power to the outside and the more strict dependence on the inside. So in other words, he says there's a correlation here. That means there's these two things occurring at the same time. Expansion of in other words, expansion to power to the outside, more power, to these things to do things. At the same time, is more strict centralization. In the actual exercise of this power, the commissar depended on different actual conditions, most of all on the support given by local party organizations, the popular societies or Jacobins, and later on local revolutionary committees made up of dependable residents. In particular cases, these proved just capable of controlling the commissar and of exercising a local dictatorship, a law, as the commissar himself. And the Committee of Public Safety used them as a tool. So therefore, not only the commissar, but these localized revolutionary committees that act as local dictators. In other words, these local revolutionary committees made of dependable residents. They kind of not only were a check on the commissar, but they also could act as a tool by the in other words, this Committee of Public Safety as itself. In other words, they could. However, the achievement of these months was the restructuring of the current state form in the spirit of the revolution and suspension of conservative elements in the local and provincial administration, as well as the suspension of the strong federalist movement. So therefore, it's three things going on. One is the suspension of any conservative elements in the local political administration, as well as the suspension of strong federalist movement. So therefore, no more local control, local thing. Everything was towards the center, and that's the administrative center, and controlled by the committee is restructuring in the spirit of the revolution, in that sense, in the spirit of the revolution. And the restructuring, therefore, everything had to be restructured of the state to the spirit of the revolution, as well as eliminating conservative elements, as well as eliminating federalist elements. The instruction received from the committee of 7th May 1793 gives an overview to the tasks and authorizations of the representatives. First of all, all issues were already mentioned were listed here once again, with the comment that in extenuating circumstances, the representatives were allowed to do everything that that the situation needed, and that their real task consisted in this: to expand and propagate rapidly the influence and authority of the national representation, of the national representative. Okay. So, yeah. To expand and propagate the influence and authority of the national representation. And so that France would be a unified, undivided country, and that there would be a central, in other words, un centro de action of government and administration. So, in other words, a central action of government and administration. Central action and then government, movement, government, and administration. So central action of both governance and administration. They must report back to the committee regularly and present the committee with a plan of action. In fact, the fact that control was bound up with all the means of such control, inspection, reports, dismissal, and reappointment, was the basis of their activities. It followed from this instruction. So therefore, this instruction authorized them to doing it. This instruction is the 7 May 1793. Therefore, creates the power of structure, the power to what? To bound up of control. That is, inspections, reports, dismissals, and appointment. Besides, the activity of the representatives came to be wide-ranging, but their authority could not be delegated any further. They couldn't delegate any further. They had to establish in their district a committee of correspondence, a commission central committee, consisting of people of politically reliable people, whom they should use, but whom should not take independent decisions. So therefore, that these people should not, this commission central, should be something they use, but they are not allowed to delegate. They're not to have any power. They should only do. They should be basically just do what the representative has told them to do. In that sense, right? They had no authority. They could not delegate their authority any further. In other words, they were the exercise agent of that, and they were doing that. They could create subordinates who could commission a subordinate entity, a commission of a central commission, a central committee, central commission, right? It's a commission central with reliable people, but they couldn't delegate to them. They had to use them to accomplish them. They could be used as tools, instruments of them. They were instruments to carry it out, not a further agent of control. They had no discretion in a sense. The representative still could dispose of state finances that they had already been allocated. In other words, the representatives could dispose of state finances as they've been already allocated, but they had the option of putting pressure on wealthy citizens, not just to force them to buy bonds of the revolution, but also on behalf of all. In other words, not only make them force them to buy bonds of the revolution, but also on behalf of all imaginable patriarch organization. So whatever you need, anything that benefits the revolution, they can put pressure on them to pay for. Now all the constituent organs, the powers that constitute, right, disappeared before the representative. So therefore, all the organs that were created, the constituted organs, all the constituted organs, disappeared before the representatives. The commissars sent by the council, executive council, or by the Ministry of War were only allowed to take up their activities after the representatives of the National Convention had signed off on their passports. So in other words, everything reported to them. In other words, normal organs no longer operated within the functions of things, these organs. Rather than everything, if they sent people there, they only could be only after they were accepted by the revolutionary representatives of the National Convention, signed off on their passports. Quite often, as a consequence of war and of the internal insurrections, the local communities constituted themselves into autonomous unions, and then dispatched their own commissars. So they kind of made Soviets, right? I don't want to use the Russian term. The local community constituted themselves into autonomous unions, and they would dispatch their own commissars. In such cases, the representatives of the convention, in his authority as an agent of the central unity, opposed local and provisional autonomy and self-government. He abolished them, together with any intermediating or mediating manifestation of the supreme power of the state, and with any enemies of the republics. Therefore, any one of these local regions who try to create an autonomous entity, the representatives of the National Convention would then go there and suppress them, because they were not allowed to have no mediating entity, no federalization, no regional control. Look at number 38. Let's see what number 38 note is. Apart from the supremacy of the Commune of Paris, the phrase partisan Parisian dictatorship, the phrase Parisian dictatorship designate opposition on part of the centralized rule of the Committee of Public Safety to any kind of local authority in federalism. The phrase is used here in the same way as in a federal state. For example, in the United States of America, where the phrase dictate laws is used very succinctly when the state as a whole implements a regulation that transcends the sovereignty of individual federal states and ignores the intermediate existence of such a state. In other words, it is dictate laws. That means it supersedes, these laws supersede the state authorities in that sense. Because supremacy clause. Okay. The type of action that the commission of these representatives stood for appeared clearly everywhere. In other words, that they were the real people. The type of action that the commission of these representatives stood for was clear, centralizing power. Several revolutionary decrees declared entire categories of state citizens to be enemy of the motherland. Decrees of 27 Germinal 2 and of 23 Rouge and the summarizing decree of 27 Pareva, the 2, the year after the change of the calendar, right? These categories of those declared enemies of the motherland sentenced to death comprised not only aristocrat priests who did not take the oath, non-jurors, right? Non-jurors, okay, those who did not take the oath, and their followers, profiteering suppliers, fraudulent price inflators, or people who spread false rumors, but more generally anyone who encouraged the corruption of the citizens, and the subversion of the powers of the subversions of the powers of the public spirit. Period. So therefore, not only mention the scope, that these decrees declared anyone who was an enemy of the motherland and sentenced to death. Not aristocrats, priests who did not take the oath, right? But and their followers, profiting suppliers, fraudulent price inflators, or people who spread rumors, and anyone who encouraged corruption of the citizens or subversion of the public spirit. These now became enemies. This is the list of this. They were thereby stripped of any legal protections, and they became the objects of action guided only by political goals. On 16 August 1793, the convention declared that a decision taken by the provincial administration that had caused suspending the execution of a directive imposed on the representative was an attack on the people's representative, and any official who delayed the execution of a decree issued by the representative was threatened with 10 years incarceration. So therefore, that you didn't, in other words, if there's a decree from this person, this people's representative, in other words, the representative was, in other words, any representative, any provisional administrator who interfered with the execution of a decree. So any official who delayed the execution of a decree issued by the representatives, in other words, representatives of the National Convention, became was threatened with 10 years incarcerations. And in the end, the public authorities of the time became, without exception, unconditional instruments of of the representative's action. They were the representatives of the National Convention that all the administration of this became merely agents of action of them. In other words, let me see, am I correctly saying that? In other words, unconditional instruments of the representative's actions. In other words, they became instruments, unconditional. They became, without exception, unconditional instruments. All the public authorities of the time became unconditionally controlled instruments of the representative's action following implement here. Remember, these representatives were also being controlled by the Committee of Public Safety. So therefore, there was more strict control. But the absolute, this is Schmitt talking about how the expansion of that control increases, right? This entailed the translation of all existing powers and functions, which then combined with the continuing function of the representatives to take all the measures that specific situation required. Inconsequently, the legislation of the revolution was no longer hindered by regard for any rights of the political enemy, and anyone who stood in the way was a political enemy. So therefore, the legislative situation no longer had to concern itself with the rights of any political enemy, because anyone who stood, and by the way, anyone who stood in the way was a political enemy. So you opposed it, and you became the political enemy. The dictatorship of the representatives rested on these two elements. So therefore, what is the two elements? One is a transition of authority, right, that combined all these things. And therefore, anyone who stood, in other words, all existing powers were made instrument, and anyone who stood in the way of this became no longer hit. And the consequence is two ways. Is that convention, all things centralized, right, to the authority, and second thing is that they anyone who, in other words, all legislation came from here had no rights to it, and therefore, how do we continue? The dictatorship of the representatives rested on these two elements. It was a commissarial dictatorship within the framework of sovereign dictatorship of the National Convention. So these commissioners were at one level commissarial dictators within the framework of the sovereign dictatorship of the National Convention. The revolutionary tribunals were certainly a most effective addition in cases where the situation permitted the pretense of a judicial procedure. That is, when the political enemy was arrested and there was enough time to subject him to instrumental justice, even in an extreme summary procedure took a certain amount of time. Then the sentence was then the sentence itself was a means to serve the revolutionary end. Right, the sentence of a judicial procedure. There was enough time to do it. Therefore, could be done. The sentence could be achieved, and therefore the sentence itself was a means to serve a revolutionary end. It was intended to render the sentenced person harmless, and at the same time to make an object of exemplary punishment out of him. In other words, to use him against the enemy as a deterrent and a means of intimidation. Okay, we're going to stop here. This is the third. This is the part I hit my page. This is the plate I kind of divided the text into. If you have any comments or questions, please put them here. It'd be good for you to do that and make life easier. Put in questions. If you have any comments or things you want me to clarify or expand upon, I will do so. Now, if you liked it, please like it. Hit the share button. Share it with your friends. Post on social media. Get it out there. If you didn't like it, okay, you can thumbs down it, but say why in the comments and explain, and maybe we can see what I did wrong or something that can be improved. And then last but not least, if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. Expand the channel. Let's encourage friends to subscribe. Let's hope to grow this a little larger. And then the next thing to do is voila. If you want to follow me on social media, the links below. If you want to follow me more about my academic background and my scholarship and things like that, my academic social media links beneath that. And then last but not least, in other words, if you want to help me to do what I do, you want to contribute, we don't have the tip jar yet, and the thing goes out. Our size isn't big enough to get that. If I'm gonna have to go, I hate to go through and correct all these videos, but I don't even know how to do that editing videos. So, therefore, if you like it, want to help, how you want to do, you can do so through becoming a member of Subscribes to our Patreon. Links are below. Another thing you can do is not links, but add URL address. Yeah, links. Yeah, I wish there were links. Another thing you can do is you can buy one of the books that I listed. I have three of my books listed below. You can, if you buy one, help. The Lulu book would be better. I would hope. Why? Because it's I'll get the publisher. Other books, publishers make money, get a percentages of it. The Lulu book, I get that what those people get, what the booksellers get. Okay, so therefore, those are the booksellers get bigger percentage of profit. Here, I get less. Here, I get the profit the booksellers get. So that's about 10%, 5 or 10%. So it's significant. I think it's, yeah, 10% to maybe even 20%, some publishers. So that's why it'd be better to go with Lulu. I make a little more money in that sense. But you can buy it at Amazon or any other online bookseller or from your local bookstore. Okay, well, take care, and that should be it. Um, uh, I I'm going to be. I think we're going to be doing this no longer on different days. It's just going to be posted, and well, Fridays is always going to be a kind of um, either a live stream or some activity like a live stream or chat or a book chat or book review or something like that, or messing around. Okay, okay, there. Take care. See you later. Bye bye. Have a good day. So long.